Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
I am your host, Scott Henderson, and my co-host is Dr. J. We are very excited for this guest that we have coming on today. Jason, who do we have coming on?
Scott, this is the second attempt we have made to have our guest today. We attempted the other day to get him going, and we kept having technical difficulties. Yet the interview was going really good, and so we begged and pled for him to find another time to come back and be on the podcast. His name is Joe Hagan. He's kind of a northeastern guy, if you will. He grew up in the Bronx. He currently lives in New Jersey, although he's done mostly kind of there in the Northeast, has had all kinds of experience on Wall Street. And we're going to get into that, talk a little bit about that. And then later in these later years, he's got into some crypto. However, underpinning all of this is this guy is a father. He has 5 kids, and he's been through some things that, well, maybe you talk a little bit about. However, he's always been there for his kids, and he's all about his kids. So that's one of the things we love about here on Master Your Millions is that you can have all the money in the world and be really unhappy. This guy seems to have it going for him where he understands what's important in life and wants to keep that important. So welcome to the show, Joe. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason, and I really appreciate you having me.
So tell us a little bit about your experience on Wall Street. I know you went to college, graduated college, and literally was on Wall Street, right?
Yeah, yep. I was there for 20 years. I was there on a ferry ride after dropping my kids off at preschool and watching, the plane hit the second tower right across from the ferry and, in full, color detail. So I've been there from 1989 all the way through past 2011. And from that time, really have been working and pivoting, from my local office and, in New Jersey.
And what specifically did you do? Were you a trader? Were you an account manager? How did you interact
Yeah.
with Main Street?
So great question. It was kind of like, all right, so I didn't have parents. I mean, I had great parents rather, but I didn't have wealthy parents. I didn't have people that really had access to Wall Street, right? Being a football player with great academics, always going to private school, myself and my brothers, we went and got well educated. And I remember dating a girl and 1987 happened and she was like really nervous. And I'm like, what's wrong? I'm like a sophomore in college. She's like, oh, the market's crashing. It's down 500 points. I'm like, really? So what? Like, what does that mean? Like, and here I am, a finance major. And so I dedicated myself, especially because she had a beautiful house for family. And I really started learning about Wall Street beyond my, you know, um, traditional education, at college and started reading. And when I became a really big fan of Peter Lynch, who was a value investor. And really, it resonated with me. Made sense. The whole idea about like legs, pantyhose. He gave it out to a bunch of women, and everyone was telling him he should sell his position when it was up big. And he gave the pantyhose out, and then with the competitors to like every woman he knew in his inner circle of like a half a dozen or so. And he asked them for their honest feedback, and they came back and they said, by far, without question, not even close, the legs is way better than the other one. So instead of selling his position for a profit, he doubled up. And then he did way better after that long term, just not listening to the noise or statistics. And again, that resonated with me. So I got to Wall Street and, Shearson Lehman Brothers, 14 Wall Street, right across the street from the New York Stock Exchange. I think the French restaurant upstairs used to be like JP Morgan's, like his own personal like bar and his own personal lounge in his back in his day. Latour Door, I think, was the name of the restaurant. I just had a senior moment flashback. But I just remember reading the analyst reports, Jason, and it was like, okay, I'm buying ABC company. I got to get on the phone and start calling all of my prospective investors, right? And existing in book of investors and clients, and tell them this is the reasons why we should be buying ABC. And I would just look at the chart, right? And it's kind of like, all right, it can't be this easy. I can't just call people every time an analyst report comes out. And you know what? The stock's 40 right now. It was 18 or 20, 8 months or a year ago, a year and a half ago. Like, where was the analyst then? Like, it already looks like, and to your point, we've mentioned before, a common friend, Kelly Korshak, talks about, passing the risk onto Main Street from Wall Street. And I'm sitting there going, okay. And I told every single one of my prospective clients, and I still say it to this day, I am book smart, I am street smart, and I am smart enough to know that I'm not that smart. So how am I going to really be an asset for this time I'm going to spend as a cold call with Jason Henderson, for example, my new customer? What can I do to bring value to him that he wants to keep a nice business relationship and I can build a great book of clients? So I asked a bond broker next door. I used to stay late at night, and he was like agnostic, like to any hype, and I kind of like that. I kind of gravitated towards him. I said, "Can I ask you a question?" He's like, "What's that?" I said, "Excuse my vernacular." I'm like, "Well, I'll use a different word. Does this crap work?" He's like, "What are you talking about?" I don't know. The analysts come out with a buy. You get all excited. You jump on it. You buy it for your clients. Do they make money 6 months down the road, a year down the road? And he just kind of smiled. And I said, and then he wound up teaching me a Bloomberg machine. At that time, I'm old enough to tell you, Jason, that there was no internet when I got to Wall Street. So the Bloomberg machine was like your financial internet. If you needed answers, that's why the guy's a billionaire. Like, you had to have a Bloomberg machine if you manage any real money. For a lot of tools that were on there. And all I really wanted to know, I went on a mission. I wanted to know who the heck was buying this particular stock. And then all the research reports that we had, I would go back in time and find out who was buying the stock when it was cheap. And I just came across my own research every night, kind of like trying to invent it, kind of find a niche for myself that I could really differentiate myself from your typical retail stockbroker from Shearson Lehman Brothers. We were owned by American Express back then. And I noticed that insiders in the company often were buying the stock. And then I started like just logging them. Me and my brothers had a big baseball card collection when we were kids. So I started making what I called my smart insider file. And it would be like a baseball card. I would have their track records. And I would just keep an eye out for them. And I literally had to go to a smaller firm that gave me autonomy to be able to do this after a few years, because you had to follow analysts when you're at a big wirehouse firm. So I literally had this smart insider file, and I just did really, really well, just being agnostic with the noise, being disciplined with buying. And listen, if Henderson Enterprises, for example, you guys make widgets and Wall Street is down in your stock. If I watch you buy 100,000 shares of your stock at 10 and you put whatever it is, $1 million into it, I may like raise my eyebrow and say, all right, why do we think Jason is buying? He filed with the SEC. I found it on Bloomberg. Ed, you're filing real time. By the way, a month, 5 weeks before Barron's would report it. So we would always have this little niche edge if we had it the right way, and we were real diligent watching the files. And oftentimes before they put it in Barron's, for the regular people to consume this news, you'd see a 20-30% gain on average, like kind of in there. And it was just phenomenal. And what happened, it started really, really resonating with the retail client out there, because they were like, wait a second, I'm not trying to razzle dazzle them with some trading trends, some facts, some earnings per share, some comps, the kind of language that they're just going to say, okay, I trust you because you sound smart. It was, why do you think Jason bought stock? I don't know. He knows something. I mean, but look, here's the key. Every time he does buy his own company stock, he's always right. It doesn't guarantee he's going to be right now, but I'd rather kind of put my and I always had that kind of approach. I know that was a long-winded answer, but that's how I got onto Wall Street. That's how I kind of built my book of business and my clients who are partners in a lot of deals that I've had for 30 years, these relationships, because it always made sense. Does it always work out? Way more often than following analysts at a retail, brokerage shop. And by the way, 15 years after first got to Wall Street, they started coming out with websites that tracked and ranked insider buying. Now there's something called dub.com or something like that. It just came out. I just saw kid raise. He dropped out of Harvard, I think, a second time. This kid raised $17 million. You know what they track? They follow politicians like Nancy Pelosi and the rest of them when they buy. Dub.com, check it out. So I was onto something, and it really is centered with common sense. That really resonated with a guy who's worth a lot of money, and he was a mason company or contracting company or electrical company, and it's like when we can put into terms why we're really like, okay, I get it. If my company was trading publicly and I was buying my own stock, it's kind of like I know management has skin in the game. They've got a track record. It really, you got to remember you're coming off a decade or so of double digit interest rates and CDs paying 10%. So the idea of getting into the stock market before the internet, you really had to pitch it. Like, when my son graduated Villanova in 2020, when he was going to college, I tried to give him a arm around the shoulder, like, hey son, you should look at this company, Nvidia. By the way, my best trade, my worst trade ever was Nvidia. I sold it years ago, but I made a lot of money with it following the CFO, Mark Stevens, at the time buying it. So now I'm mining Litecoin in 2014. I'm telling my son getting ready to go to college about Nvidia, and he's like, "Yeah, Dad, I got a Robinhood account and I already own Nvidia. Thanks." I'm like, "Thanks for that." That's the difference between 2015, 2016, and 1989 when I first got out to Wall Street.
So what is it that I kind of got the feeling when we were talking before that there was a couple of um, life events or some things that happened for you that caused you to start rethinking this whole idea of getting on the ferry, going into Wall Street and being there for, umpteen hours all the time. What was it that started
Yeah.
to make that crack in your thinking and saying, okay, I want to change here?
Yeah, I was the youngest of four boys. Shared a bedroom with three older brothers. You want to talk about fighting Irish? I lived it, fighting over to get to my sock drawer every single morning, right? And so inherently there's competitiveness. And I loved always being, the top producer, etc., on Wall Street. And it was financially rewarding, and then it came a moment in time where my business felt like it would never stop. I kept pinching myself on a daily. And then all of a sudden, my hero in my world, she came here as an immigrant, like born in 1900, forced to retire at the age of 91. She came here as a 14-year-old immigrant from Northern Ireland, left the fighting up there. Um, Catherine McSwagan, who came here and married John Hagan, became Catherine Hagan. And she was my hero, tougher than any human being I ever met. Mold was, and she would walk through neighborhoods of the South Bronx that you would be nervous in, and she did it for years and years and years. And then she got sick and passed away finally at the age of 96. Then my father died. Then my wife got breast cancer. 9/11 happened, and then my wife died. So it was like constant gut punch after, groin kick. And it was like, okay. And one of my favorite books that I actually always have with me for I don't know how many years, called The Greatest Salesman of the World by Og Mandino. There's 10 Scrolls of Success. And there's other personal development books that I absolutely love, but that one is like my Bible. And there's a scroll in there that says, "This too shall pass." And it really saved me, going through a lot of personal stuff. And you started the show off talking about priorities, and we all have priorities in life. And I literally, like, it just came to a place where, these cold call clients that became client, advisor relationship, we just really became friends, and we still are. Like, we're business partners in a lot of different deals together privately to this day, a whole bunch of them. And I just started interviewing some of the more successful ones, Jason. And I basically asked, I would say at least a dozen close, very successful clients what their biggest regret was. And in some form or fashion, it always boiled down to, there was a man sitting in my kitchen, and I didn't really know who he was, or this lady that just blew me away. I just wish I really knew her more. And it was their kids. Like, they were so busy becoming so successful that they missed a lot of time with their kids. And now here I am taking care of my wife with breast cancer. I am running sales meetings at a brokerage firm, and rushing home when she had an aneurysm. Like, now she can't drive. Now I'm literally taking care of a woman with breast cancer. And this, my twins were 4 when she passed away, but they were very young as I was going through all this. And I was just like, it doesn't matter anymore. I'm not going to start commuting to Wall Street so I can go back to making a whole ton of money, and somebody else is going to raise my kids. I'm going to be there for them. And then she got sick and passed away, and I stayed there, and I didn't go back to Wall Street. And when I wasn't looking, God plopped another angel on my lap. But I became, a full-time, dad, mom, football coach, baseball coach. I just did everything in town with them. And it was kind of like, Lisa was an angel on my shoulder because she turned around and put this guy in a dugout with me coaching baseball. And he completely turned me on to crypto and Bitcoin very early, like 2011, 2012. And that changed my life. It helped me pivot what I was already kind of seeing. I wish I never had to go through any of that, personal, sadness and drama. But, it was the reason why I pivoted to crypto, because somebody that was way early in that world from a firm that they were a prop shop that dominated high frequency trading. Like literally Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch and anybody in between had no idea what was going on in the HFT days. And these guys were just dominating the space. They were doing billions of transactions a day, and only 5% would actually hit, but they were all riskless. They were clipping, penny, half a penny on high frequency trading. And when I kind of realized it, and he took me in and took me to, his firm, these guys were intellectually so much smarter than anyone I met on Wall Street already. And the partners were like 30 years old, Jason, and they were making like 300 million a year. And I'm like, wait, what? These guys are trading everything from corn to you name it. If there's a bit in an S, they traded it. And everybody in the boardroom, MIT, Harvard, University of Chicago, Stanford, Princeton, you name it. And I was like, wow, this is something different. And that's when I first heard the word Bitcoin. And these guys would explain it to me.
Did I understand it right that the guy that first introduced you to this was a coach with you?
Yeah, well, he was involved with a firm that dominated high frequency trading. They wrote about him. Let's say the name of the firm, DRW Holdings, but they were in the book called Flash Boys. They actually bought 85% of the government's what the government confiscated from Silk Road back in the day. This company bought like 85% of that in an auction and then became a market maker in Bitcoin and provided liquidity. And he was like probably one of their head IT guys. His job was to make sure that all of the traders had the best of the best, speed, everything. Okay. And they had a move in the book Flash Boys. They talk about going through mountains and putting a fiber from the New York server all the way through to Chicago. And they realized it really wasn't going to work. We just got to move closer to the New York server, which is actually in Jersey City under the water. So they moved to 7 World Trade. And he chose my town to live in, Coltsneck. It's a ferry ride. It's a horse farming town. I mentioned to you before, Bruce Springsteen has 500 acres over here, and 15-minute ride to the ferry and like a half-hour ride right in, 40-minute ride right into Wall Street from there. And he chose our town to live in, and his kid was the same age as my son, a year younger, and very good in baseball. And he started coaching with me, and he got in my ear about Bitcoin early, and my life changed from there, from a business perspective.
Tell me, as best you can, do you remember the first conversation about Bitcoin and what your reaction was at that point?
Yeah, it was a whole bunch of them. It wasn't one of these stories that I heard all the time that were like these folklore where someone would be like, oh, my nephew told me about it. I wish I would have listened. It was a constant poke. But the first one was Hagan. You ever hear Bitcoin? I'm like, he's from Chicago at No Filter, and I'm from the Bronx. So you can imagine there was a little bit of adjectives in there, but I'm telling you right now, my wife in heaven never smoked, curse, or drink, and that's probably what attracted me to her. So around the kids, there was never a curse word, okay, ever. And he would be like, Hagan, yeah, and he would, you got to buy this at Bitcoin. You buy it yet? And I'm like, I don't know what it is. Like, I came from what I told you. Management had to have a stake. I wanted to see them actively buying it. I wanted to see them with a track record, and then I wanted to understand the business and appreciate it. Like, if it wasn't something that didn't resonate with me or was some kind of disconnect, then I'd let that opportunity pass. So I was pretty select, and when I felt I did my homework, I went in like in a big way. That was kind of always my philosophy, and I just didn't understand it. I'm like, there's no management, there's no earnings. I don't get it. It's like digital gold, and he's just like, and one day like I'm writing up the lineup, and he's like, Hagan, and it started moving. I mean, we're talking, it was under $1 when he was telling me about it. Then it was like $5, and he's like, did you have to buy it yet? I'm like, shut the F up and leave me alone. I'm making up the line. We were like at an all-star game and it was like intense. Like we want to win, right? I'm like, I'm making out the line. I'm like, leave me alone. He's like, come on, you got 20 grand doing it. I said, you're counting my money now? You're going to tell me what to invest in? Really? I'm like, come on, leave me alone. And then honestly, I just felt like I was missing out on something. I did have a little bit of FOMO, even though nobody I knew who I heard anything about Bitcoin before. Really, there was like select few. And then I watched it go to like 1,000. And after a couple of office visits, I realized I said, "Listen, Eric, I'm an retail dinosaur stockbroker, equity guy that had a methodology that worked. I lost my knowingness. Teach me what I don't know because I understand it's really starting to resonate, not beyond just Bitcoin and digital gold, but if you listen to the conversations around the folks that were, they were like meteorologists, or you name it. They were trading crop, this, that. They were from Harvard or MIT. And I'm listening to them, and really it was all about the blockchain. It was all about the folks being fed up with what happened in 2008. That's the reason why the white paper on Bitcoin. And I just started listening to it, and it was about freedom. It was about lack of censorship. It was about ownership of your own currency or your own data. And I just said, yeah, like I get it. And I totally didn't get it. If it wasn't for my mentor, who was 10 years younger than me, in my ear, kind of like, we were good friends to boot, just really helping me open my eyes because it was a hard eye opener. But, what happened was Bitcoin came down to like 400 from 1,000. I felt stupid, but I nibbled on a little bit. And then he gave me the opportunity when he saw the original owner of my house used to own like freehold lumber, and he had like this compressor, and he used to have like 8 classic cars with a lift in the garage that he would rent them to movie sets, but they were his babies. But because of that, I would always get a bar graph, Jason, which said, "This is your electricity bill, and these are your neighbors." And I was always like, "This is ridiculous." I'm like, "Why do I got all this? I love the house, but I have the electrical capacity of a strip mall." And Eric saw it, you know, dropping off the baseball equipment, and he's like, "Hagan, what the hell is this?" And I'm like, I explained to him. He's like, "Oh, I got an idea. Give me a day or two. I'll be back to you. I got a business plan." So then he came back to me and he said, "Listen, one of his smart guys from University of Chicago wrote an algorithm, could figure out the electricity cost of what it would cost to put 100 computers in there and mine Litecoin." So I'm like, "Okay, what's Litecoin?" I thought we liked Bitcoin. He goes, "Bitcoin's great. If you love it, just buy it, and it's still a buy here. But if you're going to mine it, you're going to go against the mining concentration and the mining monopoly of there's too few powerful. Unless you own a data center or have access to a data center, it's not worth it." But nobody really knows about Litecoin yet. They don't have an exchange here yet. I'm like, "What is it?" "It's the silver to Bitcoin's gold, put it this way." And I don't know if this is accurate, but he said, if you want to buy a penthouse, and this was happening at the time in New York City, use Bitcoin. You want to tip a waitress, use Litecoin. It breaks down quicker, etc. That's all I need to know. And so we mined Litecoin. We had 100 computers in my garage and in my house, and that started it.
That's how you start really into it. Then are you a part of his firm now, or what was next? I mean, you still have those servers? Are you still mining, or is it
No, that
you
was a
just put the
private venture. Private venture. Clients of mine, I just told them the story. And I'm telling you, him and his partner, I had 2 partners in this venture. I got my partners were my clients, lawyers. One guy was a head engineer at SanDisk, built some of those products, senior VP of operations over there. Um, a mensch of mine, Brooklyn Jewish guy that went out to California and like crushed it for SanDisk, Silicon Valley, and he was like coming back. Like they got bought out at the time, and so when you talk about technical questions, when you talk about legal questions, when you talk about every question, a couple of my guys were managing directors and senior partners at like Ernst & Young or Price Waterhouse. So like this is why I love doing this, because I'm like, okay, if there's a smart question to be asked, I think I've asked most of them. But my partners and my clients, and these guys all would ask the most skeptical questions, like, eye-opening questions for me. And Eric, both names were Eric. 2 Erics would just bang away, answer them like, "Yeah, but boom." And like those sessions helped me kind of really see what the blockchain and where we were going. And yeah, it's really not gold or silver, but the average person will help understand like that analogy a little bit better on how it'll work. It's as a store of value in the blockchain, blah 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 blah. And everyone just came back to me and said, "Yeah, all right, I'm in. I'm in." Like every question was answered, and we all like whatever was 50 grand or whatever we started a lot of mining rigs and we set them up. And I was the dumb one of the group. I was the guy. If I wanted to go out to dinner, I trained my oldest two kids on if they're throwing a million guesses a second at an algorithm. So the like literally you can walk into this is not a visual anybody wants to see, but I should say it joking around facetiously, purposely. I'm like, it could be 10 below zero, and I can walk into my garage in Speedos and start sweating because of those, that's how much heat these computers like spun off. So I had the air conditioning on in the summer, and all of this was factored in because I had smart partners. And when they ran hot, they would trip. So you'd have to just reboot them, turn them on and off. And so, time to make the donuts. If you ever remember those old commercials from Dunkin' Donuts, the old guy would wake up in the morning, 4 in the morning, time to make the donuts. I would get a call at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. Hello, hey again, yeah, minus 72, 36, and 48 are down. You got to get them on. Like the idea was, we felt it was going to work, but to make it work, every one of these rigs, there were computers with NVIDIA, graphics chips, the best ones. They had to be running at all times. If they went down, you had to put them back on. That was the key. They threw a million guesses a second at an algorithm. And so if I went out to dinner, I taught Joey and Brianna how to reboot the computers. And we mined a lot of Litecoin at like $2 and $3, and it did nothing, absolutely nothing for like 2 years. In fact, Jason, if you were one of my partners in the deal, like these guys were all cool. They were all sophisticated, understood the risks, and they're like, "Hey, so what's going on with Litecoin?" I'm like, "Well, Jamie Dimon's calling Bitcoin a scam on TV, but like what I learned from these guys is that the really smart guys, like you said before, like risk gets transferred to the Main Street guys." And I'm listening to the talking heads on TV call it a scam. I have buddies that were at Morgan Stanley. They're like, "Listen, we're putting $2.5 billion investing into." They know it's an asset that's coming, so they're building a derivatives exchange, and they're investing so much in the back office to get ready for this asset that's coming, which we have today is Bitcoin ETFs and so many other things even before the ETFs. But on TV, it's a scam, it's this, it's that. And I laughed. I wrote a LinkedIn post yesterday because it's like, I remember when they said Bitcoin was just for drug dealers, and then it was just for small companies, and then it was just for small countries. And then it's like, okay, now Louisiana is the first state that will accept payment for government services in Bitcoin, like even one of our states now. So like, and and JP Morgan and all these big companies, they BlackRock, the rest of them, they use Bitcoin in an ETF, and Ethereum is happening as well, and there will be others coming. So that stuff is mainstream. I'm on a stream of consciousness right now, just kind of going, in the exciting part of history, because like Litecoin did nothing, Jason, for 3 years. Like this, and one thing I learned, I've been very selective in crypto. I don't chase shiny stars. I go in big, and it took in year 4, 2017, it went up 100-fold, and pretty much all of my guys, pretty much made at least $1 million in that. It was worth all of it, but it was such a learning experience because after that, he was like, "Hey, Hagan," he's like, "Yeah," he's like, "Yeah." One of his drinking buddies at the firm, one of their best traders on the desk, forget his first name, Indian fella from Princeton. He's like, "Yeah, remember?" He's like, "Yeah, I told him a lot about you as well." Blah blah blah. He's like, "Listen, his brother runs this company called Blockstacks." I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, "They're doing an ICO." I'm like, "Hold on, Eric. This guy is so skeptical. Eric could buy a lot of things. He would only buy a Jeep because," and I loved it because this was that libertarian, 10-year younger than me generation that taught me so much, which really helped as an advantage in the world of blockchain. But he didn't want a Lamborghini. He wanted a Jeep. Why? because he could sell it in 5 or 10 years and still get the most resale value for it. Like that's the way his brain was wired, which I love. And he's telling me about this Blockstacks deal. I said, Eric, you told me that every one of these ICOs, these initial coin offerings, were all crap. He used another adjective for it. He said, people are going to go to jail. They're all bullshit. Look at this Tron coin. It's worth 8 billion. What has it got? It's got nothing. At this one, that one. I said, now you're telling me about Blockstacks as an ICO. Like, I don't get it. What gives? What makes it different? He goes, first of all, they're the only ICO that is holding the hands with the SEC. They got their blessing. I'm like, okay, now I'm listening. And then he was just like, the Winklevoss twins, Peter Thiel, the Harvard Endowment, this one, that one. He named like the industry titans of crypto are in the seed round at 9 cents. I said, I'll take as much as available. And it was like, we took a nice big stake, the last of it, and it was at 9 cents. And it did nothing. I did a little bit after a year or so, but it was like year 3, 2.5 years later, it went to like $3 from 9 cents. But what it did was, again, when I start talking about it, after I listen to some of these people that are so much smarter than me, and osmosis, some of it filters in and I get some of it out on LinkedIn. Everyone's like, how do you know so much? I said, I got introduced to the right people and I just listen and I watch. I listen to people on TV. Like you could literally listen whenever Jim Cramer was saying Bitcoin, sell Bitcoin. I think it was the beginning of 2023 when Bitcoin was like 16,000. Sell it. I went to college. And I'm not an idiot. And if you own Bitcoin, you're an idiot. And he's saying sell it at 16,000. In 1 month, it was 32,000. It was like 100%. I think 2 weeks, not even a month. Like he literally said that. And then the next month, he was like hammering on the shorts of Silicon Valley Bank at 320. This is a buy. The shorts are wrong. And the Silicon Valley Bank like starts getting ready to file for bankruptcy, and that goes down. And I'm just like, if you listen to people on TV, it's scary. And I'm just been indoctrinated over the years, kind of like to take all of that with an air of skepticism and do your own homework. And that's the spirit of blockchain. And that's kind of where we are. And that's why I think I got introduced to you, because there's some things going on that I'm doing right now that kind of intersects with someone that and I'm just like, holy shit, yeah, this is the future. And I want to help the masses. Like I had a lot of people, including friends and family, that would look at me with computers and wires in my garage and in my office upstairs and kind of side-eye me a little bit, like I was a little bit crazy. And then when it worked out, they're like, that was that thing you were doing, right? I'm like, yeah. Well, how come you didn't invite me? I'm like, honestly, I've got a lot of friends and family and clients and customers that I ran out of plugs. I didn't have any more plugs to plug any more equipment in. But, some of the next projects, I opened it. I was able to introduce it to more and more people to the point where now, Jason, I think what we have will flip Wall Street on its head and we can bring the masses in. I really do. Excuse me. And that's, what I'm doing with iDefy.
Hey everyone, our discussion with Joe Hagan has been going really good. We've decided to cut this into 2 episodes and we will make this part 1. So stay tuned for next week for part 2 as we finish it.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.